For the first time, the US says it's seen evidence of North Korean soldiers travelling to Russia. South Korea and Washington say the troops could be deployed to fight for Russia in Ukraine. Our Asia correspondent Stash Butler reports.
South Korea's spy agency was the first to suggest North Korean troops had been transferred to Russia. Now, the White House says it's seen evidence showing the same. The US estimates at least 3,000 North Korean troops are training in Russia's Far East and says they could go on to fight in Ukraine.
We do not yet know whether these soldiers will enter into combat alongside the Russian military, but this is certainly a highly concerning probability.
The US statement mirrors an update by South Korean lawmakers. They say South Korea's spy agency believes 10,000 North Korean troops could arrive in Russia by the end of this year. Ukraine has called on its Western allies to respond. Neither Russia nor North Korea has confirmed the troops' presence. The US says any deployment to Ukraine would be a dramatic move and underscore Moscow and Pyongyang's growing military ties.
And joining us with more analysis live now is Senior Fellow at the Centre for Defence Studies, Associate Professor Dr. Matthew Sussex. Matt, really appreciate your time as always. Thank you. What is your analysis of the situation unfolding? Why does Russia need these North Korean troops?
Well, look, Ash, on the one hand, Vladimir Putin has been struggling to mobilise enough Russians to be able to send into what has become a pretty awful Ukrainian meat grinder where, losses of Russian personnel over the course of the war are now estimated around 600,000, possibly more. And by having North Korean troops participate, whether they're in a combat role or not, most likely they wouldn't be in the initial stages at least. That frees up other personnel that he can send directly to the front. But either way, it's a really concerning deepening of the relationship between Pyongyang and Moscow, and one where you would have to expect that North Korea is getting something quite significant in return, not just for the millions of artillery shells that it's sending to Russia, but now people as well.
We've seen this week Vladimir Putin has been hosting talks with more than 20 world leaders from countries like China and India. When the Russian leader talks about creating a new just world order, what does he mean by that? What would that look like?
Oh, look, he means a world order where there is effectively no order. Russia's foreign policy and security policy has been all about rule breaking rather than rule making. So the BRICS summit is something which pretends, I think, to be in favour of a multipolar international order. Sometimes it's compared to the G7, for instance, but it's really not a rival to the G7 because you have a whole bunch of countries in the BRICS who are probably united more by what they don't like than what they actually stand for. You have countries that are either members or candidate members, like Saudi Arabia and Iran, for instance, who really loathe one another. Pakistan and India have an extremely poor relationship. So I think it's hard to see it emerging as a really consolidated bloc that might rival the West. But, give it another 10 years or so and we shall see.
Dr. Matthew Sussex, appreciate you joining us. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ash.